only in a perfect system.
Really just because of the differences. You can kind of feel like the absolutes. How far up does it go? How far down does it go in these various capacities?
So when you're listening to a system, a headphone system, which is composed of a headphone and a system.
Yes, typically.
How do you know, when you listen to the sound of it, how do you know which one's producing the sound?
Which one you're hearing?
Which one are you hearing? Yeah.
It's
Are you hearing more of the
system.
system or more of the headphone? Or have you no idea? And that's a tough thing to ascertain.
Well, I guess technically you listen to both, huh?
Technically you are, but how do you know which one's doing what?
Theoretically, if you had a perfect headphone or a perfect system, you kind of sort of wouldn't hear it because it would produce no discernible faults. So you would be hearing or exaggerating the faults of the rest of the gear that isn't perfect.
Yeah, well, this whole word perfect, that's the problem. Like when you go to school, everything that you're taught, let's say in engineering, is in a perfect world.
Right, right.
And then when you go to apply it, none of it matters anymore because, wow, I'm not in a perfect world. I'm in the real world. And that's the problem with it. It happens, too, in audio, too, where everyone assumes everything's perfect. Oh, there's a DAC, and now they all got great specs, so they're perfect. Oh, it's an amp, solid state, great specs, perfect. Nothing can't be that. So it must be the speaker.
It's a common issue. And it is very, very difficult to really know what you're hearing to, what you're listening to. And really the best course of action almost always is experience. That's the trouble. If you have 10 amplifiers and you could go between them, you could get a very good impression what this particular amplifier sounds like. Really just because of the differences. You can kind of feel like the absolutes. How far up does it go? How far down does it go in these various capacities? How different can it sound? And that experience could help narrow down what this one is doing that's unique, unusual, extraordinary. And it gives you an impression. It's not an absolute, though, because it could be you listen to 9 other amplifiers that do something weird, and now it made this one sound normal, too.
Go figure.
Well, you do need to keep one of those variables the same the whole time, though, you know. So you need to use the same headphone on a bunch of different systems of the same amp, DAC combo, whatever, with bunch of different headphones. You know?
Yeah, if everything's a constant and you only change one thing, that definitely helps a lot. If you walk into a room and you don't know any of the pieces, you're pretty much screwed. You don't
it's
really
very
know.
difficult.
I mean, if it sounds great, then just buy all those pieces.
Do you see that at a show from time to time? People are like, I don't know, I've never heard any of this gear, but I like how it sounds.
Yeah,
so they don't know what's good in it, but they like the overall effect.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what you want to purchase if that's what you're looking for, that sound you're looking for, because someone's already got it figured out, right? You don't need to think about it. Here it is. And boy, that's the easy way out. Because if you go and experiment with this stuff, it's years.
Yeah, well, you know, most people in the community, they never satisfy, at least after a little bit. You get the itch to, maybe I can make it just that little bit better. You know? But what to change that?
Like pretty much any other issue you run into, having the gear in front of you is key. And unfortunately, it is very difficult. I don't see a good way to solve that one other than going to maybe a trade show. If you already have a headphone you really like, if it's your dream headphone, high-end, flagship, whatever, that may be the best case scenario. Then you could take your headphone with you, your personal headphone. If you have your own cable with it, great, bring that. And go around, listen to different setups, listen to different DACs and amps. And if somebody's selling a DAC, they may be willing or may have multiple amps for you to listen to it on. And you could kind of get an impression of what that unit sounds like.
Even that's definitely good advice. But of course, then the caveat is you don't necessarily know what the DAC or the amp sounds like individually.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So if you've got your own DAC at home, and I'm only looking, a lot of people only looking for one piece. They tend to have in their mind what their weak link is. You know, usually it's an amp, but it could be the DAC. So they're like, well, okay, I'm looking for amps. So now they go around listening and they find this amp that sounds great. But it just so happens, if they didn't know the DAC, maybe it sounded great because the DAC was great, and they didn't realize that what the DAC was the weak link as well. And that happens a lot, right? You start daisy chaining things where you can make one part better, now everything else, is like, now I got to fix something else.
It's tough to know, though, right? That's always the issue. And without just swapping gear out, you could do it scientifically. You could take a DAC, have 10 of them somehow magically, and start swapping them out, hear what difference it makes, and then swap the amp out. Do that for every bit in your chain. But, of course, the trouble is it could be there's a bit of magic with a particular combination that you didn't directly test. You tested the best DAC on this particular amplifier, but maybe on a different amplifier, there's a DAC that sounds better, and it's a more favorable overall configuration. So unfortunately, this is one of those situations where for an audiophile, that's kind of like your biggest challenge, knowing what to buy, what you like best.
Well, it does help if you have like a local dealer. I know, since we know the guys, you go in there and it's like, you try a bunch of stuff, plugging headphones into all different things, try new things you never tried, and then be like, all right, I want to try this DAC with this amp, and you can do that. But, most people, they wouldn't do that for
you. Might have to be there hours.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it isn't practical.
Yeah, I know. It's always like every time we do that, we go try new stuff, it's like, it's been 3.5 hours. It seems like we just got here.
Yeah, you brought up a couple variables where try this, try that, but one thing you forgot is that's with the headphone being a constant. So technically, people need to understand this because the relationship gets messed up all the time. If you have a headphone and you're only dealing with the one headphone, and that's what you're trying to mate up to electronics, when you do find whatever it is you're looking for, realize that electronics may not mate up to a different headphone. Because there's the third variable. That headphone's going to appreciate a certain sound character of a system, right? And other headphones may not. For example, if you have a darker sounding headphone or one that doesn't do certain things well, and now that the system tends to accentuate those certain things that it doesn't do well and actually gives it a boost, right? It makes the headphone sound more normal. Mm-hmm. Now you go and take a more normal headphone and put it on the same system, and the system's too forward, edgy, bright, whatever, because it's throwing more information out than the headphone requires. The headphone's already playing all that stuff. It doesn't need a system that tilts it that way. So you got to watch it. It's a synergy. People call it synergy, and that's what it is. It's synergy between the speakers or the headphone and the electronics.
That's actually probably the biggest issue we commonly see with systems. It's curious, it was brought up a little later, but people frequently have a system that they really like. They think it's the greatest. They know this particular bit of kit in their system is the best because I've already done this and I knew this one came out ahead. But they fail to reevaluate with changes. And it could be a headphone. It could be you tried 3 other headphones on the system and they were still brilliant. And then you put a different headphone on and you're assuming, well, because of my historical reference, this is probably going to be good on this one as well. And it may not be good with a new headphone. Unfortunately, everything kind of needs to be redone with most changes. Anything really significant like a headphone, it very well could be that you, in fact, were exaggerating some aspect of the sound to fix an issue with something else in the system or the headphone or whatever. And now that change caused this exaggeration to be problematic, this coloration.
And we say exaggeration because those tend to be the most obvious. Yeah. You could have things that are not there or missing that, you might not notice. But then you go to play this one track like audience noise or people clapping, and it sounds dullish with one and it sounds brilliant with another one. And it's like, well, what is it? And then, of course, the recordings. You got to know the recording. Well, it really helps to know your music. You got to use music you know. You walk in a situation, you listen to someone else's stuff, and all bets are off. You don't even know. You have no reference point.
Yep, see that at shows too. People, I don't know this song, and I don't know any of this gear.
Yeah, it's just it's all around a bad idea.
You want to try and minimize the variables, but obviously it's impractical a lot of times.
Yeah. So it boils down to experimentation. What else is new, right?
I guess they always come down to that for some reason.
I know no other way.
Unfortunately.
There is no other way. Yeah, you got to try it. It's got to work for you and you and you. And what else can you do? That's it. You got to find the stuff that works for you. So it's experimentation. It might take some time. That's okay. Take the time. And the higher up you go in the ladder, expect that everything's got to match up with it. Those $200 amps ain't going to work with those $5,000 headphones. Sorry. Don't care if it worked before or not. It's highly unlikely it's going to be
That's a fickle thing to say, but unfortunately, in experience, it almost always is true.
Yeah.
They could be exceptional in the price range, but a lot of times you take a lower cost, a more budget-oriented amplifier or DAC or something like that, and you move up the chain elsewhere, and a lot of times it really could highlight the faults or the issues with that.
Yeah, it might have enough power, right? Or gain.
You know.
It plays loud and all that, but it gets annoying, edgy, blah, blah. You know, the same routine. It's really just, it's a lack of refinement. I mean, when you look at it, you could, you know, why do you think good amps are this big? They're not empty boxes. They're full. They're full of. Well, they could be.
Yeah.
But they are full of something doing something. And the smaller boxes with the wall warts have nothing in them with a wall.
A little
wart.
more complicated than
Yeah.
that.
So,
yeah.
but I mean, you know, you think about it. You think of it, you're buying a piece of goods, you know, and it's the equivalent of a two-wheel bicycle that you pedal, you know, versus a car. There's a lot more moving parts, and it accomplishes their tasks differently. So, and you can't trade one for the other necessarily to do the same task. Sure, you can hear audio with one or the amp. Sure, you can go from point A to point B with a bicycle or a car, but they accomplish it two totally different ways. And so you can't look at things as being so black and white, you know, in this world, in the higher end of things. It's not.
No, it's not at all.
Not even
unfortunately.
close.
Curiously enough, with more experience, I continue to see this over and over. You see stuff that shouldn't make a difference, and you look at the measurements. Oh, these are identical. They sound different.
Yep.
And it only starts to really matter when you get to the really high end. So that's the trouble. You got to really experience it for yourself. I don't see a replacement because sometimes people have a little skew in their tastes from another person. So a review gets you a head start, but it doesn't get you all the way there.
I've ran into a situation recently where I'm trying to move away from my computer. Oh man,
Tell me about it.
so much better than there's a lot better solutions than computers out there. Is the consensus so far?
Yeah. Well, I slid my Bartok over to you.
Yeah.
So now you're realizing what a good source that connects to your music, you know, it connects to your NAS drive. You don't need the computer.
Right.
And yeah, that's actually a subject of another topic we should talk about is you know, a lot of people are now looking into thinking about dedicated
Streamer boxes.
Yeah, you know, anything but a PC.
Yeah.
You know, because we're running that problem with a lot of people where they're hearing noises, buzzes, and they're trying to put filters on the USB cables. Anyway, that's the topic of we did a video on noise, and sometimes there's just no solution to that other than nix the computer. I mean, you know, if there's so much noise coming off that box, you know, that you're hooked up to a keyboard and a monitor, you got to get rid of the box. You can't use it for music. You could use it for what you use it for, but it's not working. So anyway, we should probably talk about that at some point in the future.
That's another video.
Yeah, certainly. But on this video, yes, synergy is everything, and you know, don't always second guess systems and headphone synergy. If you change something and you're at the higher end of things in particular, expect to tune around the change. You're gonna have to do something. It's to take something whole new and drop it into a perfectly balanced system. You unbalance the system in some way. And I don't mean balances in, balanced signals. I'm talking about the sound of the balance of sound. So, you know, you got to, you know, only in a perfect system could you put something in and not change the balance because there was no balance.
Right, but that system doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. So there we are back to the beginning of the video, which is what we usually do. It's a full circle. And we are done for the day.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thumbs us up. Take care of yourselves.